Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. My name is Rashonda DeGraffenreid, and I serve as the Senior Associate Director of External Relations at Mount Holyoke College. Essentially, what that means is I support students with connecting with employers and alums. This event has been a collaboration initiative between the Computer Science Department, the Career Development Center, and the Alum Association at Mount Holyoke. And for students, this event is a part of Pathways to Tech series that has been going on all month of the month of September, and entails you an opportunity to learn a little bit more about specific careers in tech, how to prepare and explore opportunities within the field. I would like to acknowledge the work of my colleagues Danielle Ludd from the Alumni Association and Valerie Barr from the Computer Science Department, actually the chair of the Computer Science Department. Registered today for this session are 83 community members, the vast majority being alums and students, and we're happy to be with you all today. For those of you who are not able to join us live, I want to share that we are recording and any other recordings are not permitted. Should you have questions throughout this event, please include it in the chat. And the chat can be found at the bottom of the toolbar, and we will address as many questions as we can as we get closer to this formal panel. And now I would like to introduce my colleague and panel moderator for today, Professor Valerie Barr, Jean E. Summit Professor of Computer Science and Chair of the Computer Science Department at Mount Holyoke College. Welcome, Valerie.
I really want to thank Danielle and Rashonda for the incredible work that they put into helping organize this panel, and just say that the annual support from the Alumni Association and the Career Development Center and the Division of Student Life has been really important for us each year as we've pulled this together. So what I want to do is basically just lightly introduce our panelists by telling you their names, their undergraduate major, and the company they work at. And then we're going to dive right into questions. I've got, maybe a half dozen questions for them, and then we'll have time to get to questions that you all have. So with us today, we have Allison Chu, who majored in economics and works at LinkedIn. Anna Osti, who majored in chemistry and works at SAS. And Janaea Reed, who majored in Africana Studies and Philosophy and works at Blenderbox, and Benny Webster, who majored in psychology and works at Google. And just to frame it as they're bringing up their video, the idea of this panel is to show that although we love having computer science majors, you don't have to major in computer science to get a good job in tech. So with that, we're going to dive in. And what I would love for each of you is just real briefly, what do you do? What do you do in your current position? And we'll see if anarchy works. I'll just let you dive in and figure out who's going to go first, because otherwise I'll just call on you in the same order you always are in my Zoom screen.
Love it. Okay, well, I can go first. So I'm Benny Webster. I graduated in the class of 2013. I work at Google, as Valerie mentioned, and I'm a UX content strategy program manager on Google Play.
Awesome. I'll go next. My name is Allison. As Valerie mentioned, I am a relationship manager at LinkedIn. And what that specifically means is I partner with my clients to reach their business goals and really enhance their employee experience. I specifically partner primarily with HR, so human resource teams, marketing teams, and training and learning and development teams.
Hi, my name is Anna Osti. I work at SAS Institute, and my role is called systems engineer. Meanwhile, like if you ask even in my company, from person to person, like their duties vary. So like my role is kind of like architect, make sure that our product is connected with their infrastructure properly, and answering any technical questions during the sales process that client might have.
Hello, my name is Janaea Reed, and I am a user experience designer. I work at a small company called Blenderbox. It's based in Brooklyn pre-COVID. Now we're online. And my role there varies, especially at a small company. I feel like your titles tend to get blurred a bit, but I do content strategy, user research, user testing, and our clients also vary. So right now I'm working on websites for Mellon, RISD, list.org, Department of Education. So yeah, Blenderbox is a pretty small agency with the motto of good work for good causes. And so we focus on mission-driven websites and organizations.
So between you, you've been out for anywhere from 7 to only 2 years since you graduated from Mount Holyoke. What I'd love is if each of you could just kind of describe what that journey was from crossing the stage, getting the handshake and the diploma to the job you're in today.
I guess I can go first. Probably I'm the youngest of the alum standpoint. So I never took a single class in computer science in Mount Holyoke, but I was doing computational research in biochemical lab with Dr. Alan Van Giesen. And I think that's kind of where it's connected from me. Like in the end, originally I was planning to go for PhD. Like I had everything lined up, and my last year I was like, no, I'm not ready to commit for 5 years to that. And I started exploring what career options I have. I applied to a bunch of research assistance jobs, and I quickly realized how little they paid, and I wouldn't be able to survive in the big town or big city on the salary like that, because I also have a husband who is at school and my daughter. So in one of the career what it's called, career panels, not career fairs, that was the word. I met through the several companies, and one of them got interested in me. They pretty much said, just apply, we get you in. It wasn't my current company, but I feel like it was the easier transition then, because I had the role of software engineer, and then I landed a better job where it was better benefits, better pay, and better culture.
Janaea, let's have you go next, since we'll work in reverse order by graduation year.
Sure. So unlike Anna, I was not prepared. I didn't graduate with like a set in stone next step. My journey really probably touches on 2 themes: networking, and then once you're in the space, really advocating for yourself. And so the summer prior to graduating, I interned in Shanghai at a consulting firm, and I realized that I didn't want to do consulting. And so I kind of graduated and was just gonna stumble around and figure it out. I have a great close family friend. He happened to spend the weekend together, introduced me to another friend who just was fond of me and really wanted to help me find a job, because he knew that I'd graduated about 2 months ago and had no job lined up. And so he worked with me closely to just kind of really understand what I wanted to do with my life, and organize sort of like the skills that I could bring to a given company. And so after a few weeks of just like working together, getting my resume up to date, he introduced me to representative at IBM and then one at Blenderbox. And so I applied to Blenderbox originally as a producer, and I started as a producer here. And I was a producer for 1 year. And as a producer, you really get to see the different facets of the tech industry, from development to visual design and user experience design. And I knew that I was a creative by default. So witnessing the user experience designers like speak in meetings and go to these wireframes, I didn't really understand what they were saying, but it just made sense. Like they used a lot of industry terms, but kind of like the thinking that was behind the work was just reminded me of like some of the philosophy classes that I took, and like lots of problem solving. And so thankfully, being at a small agency, you have a lot of touch points with your directors. And so I spoke with my the CEO of my company one day. I went for coffee, and I just nervously said that I'm interested in user experience design. He was surprised, but he said, hey, like, if you really are, just meet with the director at the time, who's Or Shuttle. He works at New York Times now. And see if he can like, you know, give you some pointers and maybe mentor you a bit. And so I did that. And Aura is just like, he caught on so quickly. And so my boss then agreed to pay for me to get certified in UX design at General Assembly. And so I spent about a 10-week course there. And then the second year at Blenderbox, they rehired me, but with the title of user experience designer. And I've been doing that since. So yeah, networking. And then once you land the gig, just make sure that you're making it work for you.
So since Benny's also UX, let's go to you next.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so my path to my current role is a little crazy on paper. So after I graduated, I had committed to do Teach for America in New Orleans. So I moved to New Orleans and I taught third grade at a charter school for 3 years, which was really wonderful. At the end of the 3 years, I was still committed to working in schools, but was incredibly burnt out. So I did a 6-month backpacking trip around the world with my best friend, which I recommend to everyone. Even if you can't go around the world, taking some time off can be really, really insightful. During that time, I applied to graduate school. So the year after, I went to graduate school, focusing on education, but my major, if you will, or my concentration was human development and psychology with a focus on child advocacy. And that's really started to think about, you know, my passion is children, but like, how can I expand my impact? And like, what are the different ways to impact kids and families? It's not just through the classroom or through like the traditional education system. And so through a professor who I was connected with in my graduate school program, I moved over to Google. I started as a researcher. So I was really translating my psychology experience into doing research with kids and families, testing out mocks for different designs and products that we were working on. And then I kind of had a similar experience to Janaya where it was nice, but it didn't feel like the right fit. I had some conversations with my managers, you know, I love this team, I care about this team. I just don't know if like research is the right fit for me. And so I then ended up switching into the content strategy side of things. And as a program manager, I'm really responsible for making sure that the content strategies within my team are coordinated and organized, and I really spend most of my time thinking about our long-term strategy and scaling as a product, which has been really interesting. So very different from my third grade classroom, and yet very similar in many ways that we can get into later.
And Allison, what was your journey?
My journey was, I would say, a little bit more traditional. For a bit of a context, I'm originally from San Francisco. And so I grew up around the tech industry that was really developing when I was a kid. And so having grown up in that type of environment and having, I think similar to Janaya, understood that maybe consulting was not the route that I wanted to take, but that I would like to be in a more social role within an organization. And that my passion is really helping people solve problems. It's really I would say the basics of what I like to do. That's where, through networking as well, I actually found my first position out of college, which is at an advertising technology company based in New York City. And so I'd say I received the offer, I want to say a week before I graduated. A week after I graduated, started the job. And what I found out I started off as an account manager at Live Intent, which is that ad tech company. And what I found is that in that role, I need to be very flexible. I need to understand how to code, actually. Had to learn how to code on the job, but also that I was meeting clients when the technology wasn't working for them. And what I specifically found in that role is that many times salespeople will oversell a product, and then the company, and I was in that position where I would have to reframe the conversation with those clients. And typically those clients were not in a very, I would say, pleasant mood at that time. And so that's when I had identified, you know, I really don't think that this friction point between sales and customer success or account management really needs to exist at an organization. So that's where I really have tried to carve out my path, being the best salesperson I can be, representing the organization that I represent, but also selling with integrity. And so to that end, I've actually spent about 3.5 years in the advertising technology space. I left that space because while I very much enjoy the I would say the technical aspects of advertising technology, I just felt that my personal impact wasn't being utilized in the best way possible. And so instead of working at an organization that had no vested interest in what types of ads were being sold and purchased and whatnot, I actually moved into the market research and big data space to really partner with corporate strategy, product, and marketing teams to help those types of divisions within organizations better understand where to move the company forward. And then after 3.5 years in the market research and big data space, I actually moved on to LinkedIn, where I am now. And I will say one thing, in college, I actually really wanted to work at LinkedIn, but had no idea how I'd ever get here. To Janae's point earlier, networking is extremely key in any, I would say, move that you make within an organization, or, you know, if you choose to move on from an organization. So I would say those are, I guess, a little snapshot of how I got to where I am today.
So now that we've heard your journey from start point to end point, my next question is, are there ways in which you feel, looking back, that your undergraduate major specifically made you particularly well suited for what you're doing now? And I'll just throw it out to the Brady Bunch pictures.
I'm happy to take that one. So having majored in economics, I will say, I think that having an econ major and specifically having a liberal arts background has helped me immensely in tech. From what I've found, for people who want to move ahead in tech, usually there's the ones who are more technically focused, and then there's the ones who are more business focused. And the ones who are more business focused, if you can really hone your soft skills, specifically in and around communication, as well as relaying concepts and making it and translating that to a layperson terminology, which I think you really, at Mount Holyoke specifically, like within the econ department, you really had to do that in a lot of the courses. That's where I found that my econ major in particular was really, really helpful. Immediately after graduation, I relied directly on my econ degree because I was in the advertising technology space, where reaching equilibrium is exactly where every ad is like served. So that was really fascinating to see it in action. And then now being at LinkedIn, I have to understand what the economic landscape looks like for each and every single one of my clients. And I'm not focused on a particular industry. So I have to know how like the healthcare space is doing versus biotech versus, you know, hospitality. So understanding all of the market factors at play has been extremely helpful in my career.
I guess I spin off from that. I feel like the best advice I was given, that technical skills are important, but actually often more important soft skills, and where you can transition from this crazy product to actually explaining what it does, because often in the meetings that I participate in, it's not technical people I explaining it to, but board of the particular company. And I feel like soft skills are like very important, and everyone should probably like focus on that besides the technical standpoint. And for me, my undergrad actually also was very helpful in terms of the chemistry, and I was looking on the pharma companies as potential transition. I actually work with pharma companies in life sciences, but in different role from the other perspective. So it's helpful to understand where they're coming from, even though I didn't actually have a lot of any experience in pharma companies, but doing that research about them and understanding now where they're coming from, I feel like helps me to have the better conversation with the customers. Yeah, so I think those two main things, and seminar classes where you have debates over different things, but have it in a polite way, because you cannot yell the customer, even though you sometimes really want to, but you have to explain it in the way that they will make them agree with you. That's a very hard thing to do, not always like what you strive for. At least I do, I'm sure everyone is. Yeah, I think that was a very helpful skill that I gained too.
Great. Janae or Benny, how did your undergrad major prepare you?
I can take it. I can start. So I'd say one facet would be problem solving. So as a user experience designer, you're going to be met with problems, or you have to work with a client to be able to strategize or help understand their end goal, and then work with your team to get there. So being able to problem solve, and I think that you just naturally kind of learn those things during your undergrad experience, especially within the philosophy class. Maybe just being able to think of like a larger idea and being able to dissect it. And then also just being able to work with a team. So, while you may like control or own a certain like design component, you still have to be able to work with your development team to see if it's achievable to design within the given time frame, or work with your project manager to see if it's in budget. So just being able to work with a team and brainstorm and come to the table, I believe is really important. And then another thing that I don't think is necessarily tied to a major, but just what you can do as you're in your undergraduate experience is just really learning or understanding what value you have to bring to a company. It doesn't necessarily need to be tied to like your major or any specific experience, technical experience you've had, but we do all inherently have something about us that is valuable. So just understanding that and being able to come to the table with a company and say like, hey, look, I don't have a lot of experience in this, but I can communicate well, or I can write well, I'm really organized, and that translates into this career in this manner. So problem solving and just being able to understand and articulate like your inherent value proposition, because when you go to these companies as employees, you are their biggest and greatest asset. So being able to just speak up for what you bring to the table is just going to help you throughout your entire career. And that's just really knowing yourself.
I love that perspective, and I would +1 that 100 times. The two things I'll add, so I think the reason I've been super grateful that I pursued a liberal arts education as opposed to considering myself like a domain expert based on my major when I was an undergrad, I think I have found it to be very valuable that I have a very open mind about what information I can or should know, and I'm very unafraid to go pursue it, right? So I'm a program manager, I work in UX, I don't know how to code, I've never taken any sort of computer science class. I realized though when I joined my team that there was like a big gap between our UX team and our Eng team, and that in order to build that gap and make our team more successful and efficient, I was going to need to learn a little bit about how engineering works. And so I just went out and pursued it and figured it out by talking to people. And I think that open-mindedness to thinking, yes, I'm technically a program manager, I do have domain expertise in child development and psychology, but I can go out and learn about a lot of other things. And I think that's been really, really crucial to my success, and also has helped me move around into different roles because I'm relatively flexible and able to grow into different spaces. I think psychology is just hugely helpful at all times. I'm biased because I'm a psych major, but it's really, really helped me understand more about the users that we're working with. So what's our approach to user experience research, and to kind of understanding the needs, checking when we're making an assumption about the users rather than actually like going out and talking to people. Organizational psychology is also really interesting. Google's like a massive company, and it's really interesting to understand how employee dynamics work, and then to use that to your advantage. So if I'm talking to a director, I know here's the way I'm going to frame this deck and communicate this message based on what their focus and concerns are, versus if I'm talking to my immediate team, my framework will be different. So psychology is just helpful because I think it's really important to meet people where they're at, and especially when it comes to brains, just understanding how people retain information and doing that in an effective way is very critical.
So I'm gonna jump to a question that was asked from the audience, asked by a member of my department, because a number of you brought up this issue of soft skills. And certainly what we've heard, particularly over the last few years, Google did a whole huge survey. And so we hear now pretty often that the characterization that oral communication skills and written communication skills are really important. But the characterization of soft skills kind of tends to carry a gendered element. And so the question is, do you find there's more of an expectation that female employees will have soft skills and that male or masculine presenting employees can get by without developing those skills?
I can, I guess, take that. We just had a conversation about that with my team. And in my team, well, we recently actually became 50-50, like in gender perspective. But when I joined them, I was only female on the team, and it was hard sometimes to communicate some things across the table. I feel like anyone in tech could agree to that. But I don't necessarily think that soft skills are only important for female and only valuable in female. What I see is a trend: if you're more extroverted, you're more likely to become manager. And I think it's pretty much obvious trend for many companies, and to be like that kind of person that you can persuade your point. You just, like, if you don't have the soft skills and can't communicate something, you will just reach the glass ceiling, no matter if you're woman or man. So yeah, that's kind of what I noticed. I don't know if people will agree with me or not, but yeah.
Yeah, I repeat the statistic like all the time. So McKinsey does the Women in the Workplace study, and I think it was 2 years ago. There's a finding that, like, if a male presenting and a female presenting individual do a presentation, typically the feedback given to the male is about, you need to hit your numbers, you need to have something very quantitative and statistical, like you need to grow your impact or whatever. And the feedback to the woman is typically more like, you're not telling a compelling story. You need to work on your narrative, something a little bit more about the way that the work is presented and not so much outcome or input-output driven. And I've noticed that where the attention to things like detail in a presentation and crafting your narrative and how thoughtful you are and how you present something does seem to have some variance. I think people are super aware of the soft skill discussion and that it's typically given to women. I think people are aware of it and are working on it, but I do think that, like, I see it play out all the time. I've been in 30-minute meetings where the same one individual speaks for 20 minutes and then there's like 10 minutes at the end for like anybody else to speak, which can be really difficult. And that's something that I think I constantly navigate, of how to stand up for myself a little bit in those moments.
I think that it actually, I'm looking at the question, I guess, in the chat. And I think that it depends on what types of roles that people are in and how important communication is in those roles. I'm not certain about this. Sounds like, Anna, you might also be customer facing, but all of my clients are external. And so there's a different communication style that I take internally versus the ones I take externally. And I will say, prior to joining LinkedIn, many of the other salespeople would typically be men. This is the first environment that I've been in where it's actually predominantly women. And what we've found, I think not only at LinkedIn, but at other organizations as well, is that women typically are better salespeople and drive results, specifically because women typically have a slightly higher EQ specifically and can cater the conversation towards the client in a way that the client will receive it well. And so in that aspect, I don't think that, women are at a disadvantage. That's specifically, though, from my experience within the sales world in particular. So I guess just take it with a grain of salt. But I don't see soft skills as being an inherent disadvantage. I actually see it as being a huge advantage, and that men who cannot communicate well are typically, at least at LinkedIn, they're asked to reframe how they communicate.
I second to that.
Yeah, I don't. My experience is I've only been at one agency, and it's pretty small. But I will say that the way our company is constructed, like there's just more women in the design and project management department, and a bit more men in like the development department. And so internally, like, when we communicate with each other, sometimes like the designers and the project managers are a bit better at communicating and pushing across their ideas, and the developers we can, I think, just have to meet each other where we are. And so I don't know if there's as much of an expectation for them to be able to communicate as well as they would expect the design department or the project management department.
Yeah, I have a feeling this is something we'll probably get back to at the, later in the more open conversation. Because I do think, there's certainly, in addition to the McKinsey study, there's been analysis of annual review documents, which at least in the more technical jobs does bear out this differing expectation, which then ends up connected to differential income because it affects raises. But before we get too derailed, I have a couple more questions that I want to ask. So from your vantage point now, and again, you've been out for different amounts of time, from your vantage point now, looking back to your undergraduate years, is there anything that you wish you had done differently as you went through Mount Holyoke?
I can go first. I think I had a great time for sure. I think that there's definitely some spaces where I think I was really consumed with trying to get a job, especially towards the end. So my junior and my senior year. And I ended up then kind of like really funneling my energy at the time was into like education. So like all of my internships, all my extracurricular work, all my psych classes were like very education focused, which was great. It ended up working out. I care a lot about that. I think I could have done a better job of trying to build a dynamic skill set and a dynamic knowledge base rather than like going quite so hard for this one specific area that I thought was going to be what would get me a job. I think I wish I had like taken an econ class, for instance, Allison. Like now I look back and I'm like, I've never taken an econ class, and that seems important. So I think that I could have looked at it more holistically. Of course, I met my liberal arts requirements, but I don't think I was strategic enough in thinking about how that could build on what my interests were. I was just checking boxes a little bit. So I wish I had done a little more exploration.
With me, it's similarly because I came as a FP, so I was like basically transfer student, so I have limited time on what I can do at Mount Holyoke. And coming with perspective that I wanted to go to PhD to become a chemistry professor one day, I was like really also narrowing and putting myself to that path. And then after 2 years of research, I was so burnt out and like doing school on top of that. So I realized I don't want to go to that anymore, but I didn't have time. I didn't build out enough network outside of my major and people who major in the same thing I was and had similar goals. So I kind of like narrowed myself to that. And then when I realized it's not my option, it was like in my senior year, I was like panicking mode because I didn't know what to do. I didn't exactly know what I will be doing now, and I need to find a job. So I was like panicking. What I would have done differently about like job search, like if you are like any type of major right now, knows that many companies have like almost like quotes where they hire people who are not specifically computer science major to like in the entry-level positions, and they train you. Like I wasn't aware of that back at time, but like my company does it. I know I think Google has something similar, and I'm sure many other companies do it. So like if you are thinking about it, of course don't come like there with like oh, I don't know anything, teach me something, do like at least something. Like, I don't know, there's many courses like on edX or Udemy or you name it. You can try to do first steps, maybe do this research, because research you can do remotely anyways, like if you're talking about computational one. So like that's kind of like where I wish I would explore more. Like I think if I had bigger network in that like in the IT, like in the computer science majors, I would have probably known about that too, but I didn't at the time.
So actually, Benny, I would have taken more psych classes. So I took intro to psych and I thought it was fun, but I didn't go beyond that because I fulfilled my requirement. In hindsight, I would have taken more advanced psych classes, and I also would have wanted to take some sociology classes. And those are specifically because I think that that both psych and sociology can really help you understand how to communicate to others, especially those who do not have a similar personality or communication style to yourself. And that will immensely help when it comes to networking and advocating for yourself within an organization. So those are two areas where I would have done, where I would have liked to have taken more classes in undergrad.
So mine's a bit more general. I just started an MBA program at American University. So one of the things that are top of mind when I started my program is I don't want to repeat my mistakes of undergrad and not utilizing my resources or underutilizing my resources. And I feel like at Mount Holyoke, there are a ton of professors and just faculty in general who's willing to have honest, open, random conversations with you to help brainstorm sort of what's out there or their path or their journey. So I just wish I took more time to utilize the resources and speaking with other professors and the centers that are available. And also just maybe looking out for more conferences. I know there are a lot of conferences and I didn't really attend any. And so, yeah, using the resources to help find conferences just to explore different careers. I had no idea about much about the tech industry in my undergraduate career. So I don't know how I don't even think I wanted to know about it. But when I graduated, I realized oh, there was so much opportunity and resources and a well of knowledge at Mount Holyoke that I feel like I underutilized because I was just focused on my classes.
So I have a ton more questions, but they're all just in case there's no audience questions, but we have two from the attendees and they're related questions. So I'm going to throw them both out there because I think different one of you might have different perspectives or different things you want to address. One is for students currently on campus who are juniors and seniors who want a career in tech but aren't sure how to get there. What advice do you have? Is it too late? And I will say there's one resource I'll put in the chat, which is the Align program at Northeastern, which is a master's program specifically intended for people who did not study computer science but want to go on in that realm. But that's a very CS focused pathway into tech. It's not a pathway to the sorts of jobs you all are doing. And then the related question is, if people are already out there and they're on the job market, maybe working but looking to change, what advice do you have about building their portfolio of work while they're already on the job to prepare for the next move? So you don't have to answer both, or you can take, do them in sequence.
I can go again unless anyone else wants to go first. Everyone's like, yeah, no, you go for it. All right. Cool. So I have two thoughts that partly answer the questions, and then hopefully other folks can help piece this together a bit more. So my first recommendation is be open-minded about the role that you're looking for. So be really clear about what's your goal. Is your goal you specifically want to work in the tech industry? Is your goal that you want to be an engineer? Is your goal that you want to work at a large company? And be honest with yourself about which one of those is your primary goal. And that will actually help open a lot of horizons. So I've noticed sometimes when people are looking at jobs, they're like, and I've done this, like, I want to be at a tech company doing child development, learning design for blank program in the United States. And it's like, you're never going to find that job. But if you're open-minded to just looking within the company, you typically, once you get your foot in there, there's a lot of incentive for your managers to help you find a position that's like best suited to your long-term goals. And so I try to view it as a long tail game. Figure out what your priority is, just try to get into that space, and then spend the preceding years actually getting into the role that feels like it's the perfect fit for you. And that will obviously change over time. But I've noticed so many people, they're looking for a very specific job, and it can be very difficult to find those. Like Google, half of the jobs that are posted are like posted extremely broadly. So looking at the job listing, you might not know what team you're going to be applying to, but if you just go for it, they will try to find a good fit for you. So just be open-minded about like the actual role title that you're looking for. The other thing I always say is just like, I think one of the cool things about tech is you can do anything. You could be like a art historian and work on Google Doodles. Like you can be a scientist, you can be a researcher, you can be a chef. Like you can literally do anything at many of these companies. So again, just like I think it's good to be open-minded and flexible, and have faith that there's a lot of companies with a lot of diverse positions that aren't necessarily just engineering or, require a very specific technical skill set. That definitely is what happened to me. So.
In terms of like building skill, I mentioned earlier, but I took a class at General Assembly. And so there are a lot of those sorts of certificate-based programs for like a fee where you could boot camp. Like you learn enough to be able to get your foot in the door, but you're still going to need to have to do some like additional work with like randomized prompts on different websites online to kind of like help you build your portfolio, or reading different books. But places like General Assembly or Flatiron District are useful to just be like, okay, I have a stamp of approval that I know enough about this career to be a junior, a designer, or start. One other thing that I've recently started doing was joining a lot of like online communities. So there are a ton of Slack channels based on your different expertise. So few Slack channels I'm a part of, one's like Where Are the Black Designers? Another one's just like based on user experience design, a huge user experience design community. So there are a lot of like online forums that are available for you all. And then in terms of building portfolio, I want some things that I've heard. I just have a ton of websites that I've worked on, so I have a lot to work from. But if I was limited in that, I would there are a lot of online prompts that you could use. Just get like a random question that like redesign a website for parents looking to send their child to a new school or something like that, where you can just work through these problems just to be able to show your employer how you think. I don't think they really want like a glamorized finished end product. They just want to know how you approach the problem and the steps that you took to try and solve it, because that's what you really want to put across with your portfolio.
I think Anna, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I was just saying, one thing I think everyone should kind of have in mind is that, like, if you want a career in tech to Benny's point, like, definitely have an idea of where you're going and then learn to iterate off of that. I mean, I think I can speak for us because we're all fairly young in our careers. This is the time to really absorb as much information as possible and find what you like and what you don't like. Equally, finding what you like and don't like will be extremely helpful for you in the future, figuring out where you exactly fit and what teams you actually want to be a part of when you are in the mid phase of your career and when you're really establishing your professional brand. So for anyone who is younger on in their career, what I would kind of classify as that is anyone who's like who's less than 7 to 10 years from when they graduated, is that right now is really time to gain as many skills as possible and really experiment. I will say, like, and also, I know this may sound, this is a little bit of a harsh reality, but like when I moved from account management into sales, I did have to take a pay cut to do that. And so if you are truly passionate about what you really want to do, and you are confident in the fact that you want to be, you know, an engineer or in sales or whatever it may be, go at it 100%. Give it your all. And if you don't like the end result, you always have your previous skills to fall back on. But I would just encourage everyone to take risks, take educated risks, but take risks and keep learning.
Yeah, I think keep learning part in tech industry, actually any industry, is like most important skill you can have. Learning to learn and never like forget about it, because there's never will be the same exact job, like very rarely there will be one. And often there'll be questions that where they could ask you and you have to figure it out. So for people who are still at school, I would suggest do as many internships as you can. I think I was always doing research ones, but I feel like now I should have like done more like industry ones. So like I will try out both, and especially for internships, there's definitely no penalty of trying out different things. It's not like you will be changing a job year after year, whereas it will be like, like when people will be wondering why you're hoping different jobs so much. So like internships, I think will be very helpful. And also like some courses, like more known ones, at least that I know of, Udacity, they have very, like, it's quite pricey to my opinion, but they often have scholarships. I actually did one program for free because I applied for the scholarship. And it helps you to build out portfolio and give that foot in the door. And there's also boot camps, like do research about boot camps, because not all of them are legit. Like if you're already in the out of the job and doing something non-related to IT industry in general, do your research about this boot camp particularly, but there are plenty that will give you enough knowledge to get your foot in the door. Many of them, I know there is one in California, I can't remember the name of it, but it's actually free. It's pretty much like university, but it's very extremely competitive to get into, but they give you that portfolio, basically, like the classes and the learning, like similar to school, that if you wanted to transition to that tech job later.
The other thing I would add is, you know, I think that when a lot of times when people think about the tech sector, they think about, you know, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, Netflix, LinkedIn, you know, there are these big name tech companies that are the ones that spring to mind. But the reality is, we say this in our CS classes all the time, but it really is true that every field is now a tech field. So if you think you ultimately want to end up in tech, your path doesn't have to start with a tech company. It can start with a company that isn't defined as a tech company, but they all have tech components. I mean, Coca-Cola is a tech company. There's no question. You know, the agricultural companies are tech companies. The healthcare companies are all tech companies. So you can take your undergrad major, work your way into a position, and then once you're there, and I think both Janaea and Benny had some of this experience, once you're there, then increase the tech side of what you're doing and show that you're really interested in that. And because your employer values you as an employee, then they will help you move in that direction. So, you know, I think that there's one of the things that to me is really exciting about this technological world now is you don't have to know the day you leave Mount Holyoke that you want to be in tech, and you can still end up. And we've had people, you know, this is the 4th year we're doing this panel, and we've had people who were Romance language majors who ended up at Google Maps, and, you know, economics majors ended up doing big data analysis at Indeed. And those people did not think when they graduated that they would end up, you know, in tech. But we've also had people working at other companies that aren't the ones you always think of when you think about tech companies, but they're doing tech. So I think that, that's what we really are hoping will come out of this, is that there are so many different paths. So Anna, I want to throw one question your way, which is for transfer students, the time period they have to build a network as an undergrad is much shorter. What advice do you have, since that was your situation?
Go out, and I was luckily given that advice by Carolyn Detail to connect with professors right away. Even before classes started, I went out and tried to get my foot in the door of professors that I will take classes in this semester or next semester, so that I can talk to them and get any advice to they have. And many of them I actually still chatting sometimes, even now. So it's kind of like lifelong relationship. Almost they checking out how you're doing and so forth. So I think that was the most important skill. And I wasn't living on campus too, so which was also given me, I guess, a disadvantage in a way, because when you live in there, you live with other students in the dorm, you're going for each meal with them, so you have more bonding time and networking time with all the students. So I would usually try to go for lunches and sometimes stay for dinners there when I can. Yeah.
And I want to make a plug for the Gates, which, if you haven't already, you will get an invitation to, which is really a platform designed to make it easier for students, alums, and faculty and staff to connect. And so it's a wonderful way as a student or a recent alum to make connections to people who are in the sort of industry you want to go into. And I applaud, I love the fact that the college is, well, we value that class year relationship. I was just on Zoom with 30 of my classmates the other night. Also recognizing that Mount Holyoke can really facilitate other sorts of connections among the alumni body. So definitely take advantage of that as it rolls out. The next question that came up is, I know this is a particular moment because of COVID and travel and all of that and restrictions and visas, but if we just kind of push all that aside for the moment, do you feel is there any shift in the corporate world as you see it for, is there any differential preference toward domestic versus international hires? Are international students at all at a disadvantage when they're job hunting?
I can take this one from both a startup perspective and a large corp perspective, because prior to joining LinkedIn, I primarily worked at startups or one mid-sized company. From an international versus domestic perspective, if you are an international student, I would target larger organizations that have the budget to sponsor you. Startups are great, and they'll promise you the moon, but just to let you know, even if a startup says that they're going to sponsor you, they likely will not have the funds. So I would very much suggest that you primarily look at larger organizations and I would say leverage LinkedIn, leverage the Mount Holyoke network, leverage the networks that you can to get a foot in the door, and then go from there. But that's just my piece of advice for anyone who's international.
And another question I have, so Benny, you did grad school, and Anna, you decided not to.
I'm actually doing master's right now. But yeah.
Okay, so you're in now, and Janaea, you're in now, and Allison, you haven't done
Not
it
yet, but I'm actually looking to go get my MBA part-time though.
So I guess, so my question is, how does, reflecting into this whole mix of undergrad, job, and then the grad school piece, what role does that additional study play, and what thoughts do you have about the timing of doing that and the additional ways that that helps you construct your network moving forward?
So I felt like I was kind of hitting a ceiling in terms of what I could do at my current role. And, you know, I knew that there was a possibility that I could just probably go to another company and focus on a different style of design, maybe like more product design. But I knew ultimately, like, I want to do community design. So getting an MBA was kind of just like the best way for me to start on that longer term goal, because I had kind of got into like a level of my agency where it's like, okay, I'm pretty much, I think I've learned what I could learn here. I'm still there because like, yeah, but the plan was to like get into business school and then stop working, but that didn't happen the way I wanted it to. But yeah, it's just because I wanted to change, like change my career path a little bit. And so I felt like an MBA was just the best general degree for me. It wasn't necessarily because I felt like I needed it to continue to grow as a UX designer.
Yeah, I always recommend a very critical pro-con evaluation for the grad school route. Like, at least for me, I had to acquire a lot of loans and other things that also have a long-term impact. Like, yes, it helped me with some of my career goals, but it's not a very casual decision at the same time. So when I decided to, I was still very much in the education space, and it was really important to me that if I was going to go where I wanted to go, which was to do a lot of child advocacy work, I needed to have like really legitimate educational experience to back the work that I wanted to do. And so that was the piece there. My team at Google, however, our director, many of my leads did not go to graduate school. So I don't think that it's necessarily a requirement at all. And I think there's a lot of pros and cons that are very different for every individual that are worth weighing when you make that choice. And that plays into the timing as well. So it's a kind of a non-answer, but I really believe, like, I don't think grad school is the answer. I don't think it's not the answer. I just think that you really have to do a lot of self-investigation about, like, why do I really want this? What do I hope to get for it? Is it worth the amount that it will cost me and the time? And then you can usually end up at a choice there.
Yeah, I kind of did similar evaluation in terms of, like, because especially at the very start, I'm only 2 years out of college. I had to do a lot of evaluation in terms of, like, because I can invest more time into work and maybe progress faster at my work that way, because I will be doing maybe extra things and get noticed by my peers and managers and get promoted faster. Or I can do the master's on the side and just do what I need to do. So I guess, like, in my case, it's kind of like, I wouldn't necessarily, it's an answer, but I know that my company promises a bonus with a finishing master, and they also pay for my master, so I decided, why not? Yeah, I mean, like, I also learned a lot of skills that I actually use it at my work, so I think it's win-win situation, because I didn't come with that deep technical background. I think I'm compensating for that now, and gaining all the skills I'm lacking.
Yes, I would +1 to what Benny had just said about how it's really a personal decision whether or not you should go to grad school, and there's a lot of different factors at play. I actually did, I don't know if anyone else has done this, but I actually participated in the Forte Foundation, which is a nonprofit that helps women specifically understand if they do or don't want to go to business school specifically. And so in that program, that's where I did a ton of self-reflection, and I found that going for a full-time program at the juncture where I am right now does not make sense, and that I should actually pursue a part-time program. And I'm specifically looking to, I understand that I'll be taking on a fair amount of loans and whatnot, but I am looking at business school as an opportunity to really expand my current network. I understand that I have the Mount Holyoke network and the network in the tech community in New York, as well as now being at a larger organization, but I don't want to stop there. And I really do want to be in a more academic mindset with other people again. So that's one of the reasons why I specifically want to go back and get my MBA. Another is that having been a part of many smaller organizations and startups, I've seen a lot of, I would say, like kinks and ways in which organizations can expand and grow in a better way. And so I'd love to take a deeper dive and learn more about how organizations develop. And quite frankly, I don't have a finance background. I'd love to better understand the finance side of things as well. But those are some of the things that I personally am thinking about. But to Benny's point, it's very much a personal decision, and very much a timing of when, like right now, LinkedIn does offer to pay for some education. So that is one of the main contributing factor as to why I'm considering it at this time. So all those factors are at play.
So for those of you who are not keeping up with the chat, there are some links there, and also the offer from an alum with 20 years non-technical experience in the tech industry to provide mentoring, and you can email her. So that's a very generous offer. Thank you. So you've been in, all of you been in, you know, tech for some number of years now, and you know, you've said a little bit about this when you talked about your journey, but you know, we know this field changes all the time. I mean, it's probably changed just in the hour that we've been standing here talking. You know, there's new stuff that's come out, there's new releases, there's new this and new that. How do you feel, again, reflecting back, how do you feel that your undergrad liberal arts experience helped prepare you for being in a field where change is so rapid? And the change may be different. I mean, on the sales side, things might not change as quickly. On the other hand, they might, because there's always new stuff to sell. So how did your education at Mount Holyoke prepare you to deal with that rapid change that happens?
I would say my time at Mount Holyoke, and specifically with a liberal arts degree, really encourages you to think on your feet and be a critical thinker. Those are two things that I think have really helped me adapt to all the changes that have happened, whether they be on an industry perspective or from a client-specific perspective. So I would say that those two in particular are skills that I've gained from MoHo.
Yeah, I'd say just like knowing that you don't know everything, you're never gonna know everything, but just being comfortable with like in that space and asking questions when you feel like, okay, there's this new trend and should we try it, should we not? So I myself have had to learn that over the years, especially since I learned on the job. I felt like at some moments I needed to be able to speak to every trend and every, oh, in mobile they're doing this now, on desktop this is the cool thing. And then I realized like I was just overwhelming myself with trying to keep up, and that we're a team, and so everyone has something to bring to the table. So just being honest in those spaces of like, okay, I'm not sure, what do you guys think? It could be as simple as that, or I'm going to come back to this, I don't know right now, let me think on it and let me do some more research. So just knowing that it's okay to not know and being comfortable with asking questions. I think Mount Holyoke's taught me that.
I think in my case, doing research actually helped me immensely, because like when you have classes, there's a structure, that you get to the answer like at a specific timeline often, if not. But with research, you often throw in a question which you don't know the answer to. The PI doesn't know answer to. Like you have to figure it out, and you have to like try to answer that. So I guess like that's kind of like being comfortable with like the same thing, that you don't know everything, you just have to learn it and try to find the best answer possible.
Yeah, I just have learned how to embrace discomfort and being the person in a meeting when there's an acronym on the slide and like nobody else is asking, and I'm like, hold on, could just what's the acronym? And I don't know, oftentimes half the other people don't know what the acronym means either, so it usually pays off. I've also just gotten in the habit of like And I did this in Mount Holyoke of like just staying in touch with folks. So like people who previously worked on my team, or like a PM who I used to work with, but I don't work with now, just to know like what they're working on, what are things that are on top of their mind. It kind of helps me see problems or solutions or tools or new things that I could use that might not be directly in front of me. And that also helps with like looking for other jobs. Like people will leave companies eventually. And so you now just making sure I'm keeping that network fresh and up to date has been really beneficial.
So one of the questions that sometimes comes up is the role of professional associations. And so I want to ask, do you belong to any professional associations? How have those memberships helped you build your network? And would you recommend that undergrads or very recent grads go ahead and sort of self-consciously join professional organizations, professional associations?
So I don't belong to any like official professional networks, but before the COVID, I was constantly going to the meetups, like professional meetups. And I don't know how many people know, but in North Carolina, there's like so-called research triangle. There's 3 bigger like schools, and there's a lot of tech and biotech companies. So like there's a bunch of them, and any company has IT stuff to it. So you can pick topic of the knowledge. And that's actually what really helped me when I was switching the jobs, like to increase the network. And I think it's all come down to networking. That's the biggest, not skill, but I guess tools that you utilize to do anything, because I was researching what I want to do, because I started with software engineering, where I was solely just doing coding and did very little interact with people. And I realized I don't want to do just that. That's why I transitioned to my role where it's like mixture of talking to the people and coding. So I think it doesn't matter if it's have to be official or not, like, but they do help, because like if you don't find a mentor in your company, you can find a mentor in those organizations. And I think it's very important to have one, because if they have, like, I personally wasn't turned down once when I asked for help, because like we always in the point in careers, like, or in life where we need some advice or perspective from other side. So I think the best benefit is for networking, like job referrals too can come out of it, and like giving advice how to advance to where you want to get from where you are now.
I would +1 to that. Yeah, I would definitely +1 to that. And in fact, my second job that I had, I actually met that boss at a bar at a women in tech event in New York. She at the time was not hiring, but she said, I really like you. Can we keep in touch? When I know that I am going to be hiring in the very near future, next 6 months or so. So, you know, when I am, I really want to reach out to you. So I would say networking is extremely important. I think that prior to COVID, similar to you, Anna, went to a lot of meetups. I would say professional, like actually accredited, like professional, I would say organizations are also good, but especially for those who are lower on a budget, just go to the meetups, you know, those are really awesome. And you can also tell pretty early on, okay, I'll go to one, see if I like it. If I don't like it, I don't have to go again. And it's not as if you had a hefty investment, you know?
I'll just add +1 to the meetups. The only like professional organization that I'm a part of is the National Black MBA Association, so it's not really tied to tech, but it's important for some of these associations, because I will say that I did get a full scholarship because I was a part of the association. So they have their pluses if you do your research.
Yeah, +1. The 2 things I'll add is I do think that they're great to join. It took me a while to realize, though, you get as much out of it as you put in. So you do need to like invest in then like contacting people and going to the meetups. Just being in the group doesn't like, you know, suddenly generate a bunch of stuff, which I know sounds obvious, but just is a helpful thing to remember. I also think like when I was looking for a job, I joined a bunch of networks, and I think it's been important for me to make sure the networks that I join are the ones I'm passionate about. So for instance, like I'm in the Children's Media Association, which I'm super passionate about. And so I engage with them. I engage with the members all the time. I go to all the sessions, and then I'm in some others that I'm not as passionate about program management. And so I don't really engage with that. And so I wish maybe I had just been a little bit more thoughtful when I joined some of them. But it can just help just make sure that you're actually passionate about it, or you're passionate about what you want to get from the group when you choose to join.
Great. So, so I'm going to confess that we advertised like different end times for this. So I do see some people are leaving because some people thought it was going to be only an hour long. So I want to ask one last question. Benny, this is a repeat for you because we were part of a session, I don't know, back in March or April, though maybe your perspective has changed after all these months. So the last question I want to ask is, how do you think working remotely compares to working in person, particularly with respect to your status on your team or with your group or in the company? And this, I asked this in particular coming from sort of the women in tech side, and wondering if the remoteness in any way levels the playing field, because it kind of makes the visible differences a little less visible because we're all like, you know, you can just turn your camera off. Or if it makes it harder because you really have to assert yourself and insert yourself into the things that are going on. So I just throw it out there. How is remote compared to in-person?
I guess I can start. So I also have a child. I don't know how many others do have kids. And to me, remote is great when she's not at home, which is not that possible. Because she is at home, and I had almost like a conflict with one of the people at my team he is male and he has 2 kids, and he was like, look, I'm doing that, but then later I find out that there's 2 grandparents involved in helping them out, which he didn't mention, of course, and thinking that I don't know what he was thinking, but anyway, it's got resolved, but not in the most pleasant way, and I'm still like a bit like have a big grain of salt out of that conversation. So I mean, like, that obviously a lot harder in terms of like online schooling kid, and I mean, like, I feel bad for everyone in that kind of situation, for teachers, for students themselves, and for parents. And I guess like understanding that everyone has different needs in that kind of space, like it's important. And often, like, my husband is great, but sometimes still we having conversations about, like, you know, like he doesn't see like a lot of unseen job, like work that being done. So like having that in mind. But in terms of everything else, like if it wasn't for that, that would have been probably like a lot better in general. Yeah.
I can go. So I have like some pros and cons. I think that the cons are that we're just like a really social industry, I think, and especially in my agency. So there's lots of like impromptu hangouts after work or staying late and just like ordering food and drinking. It's just, we just hang out a lot. So I kind of do miss the not always talking about work with their coworkers and like being able to like build a relationship, because I have really great relationships with some of my coworkers, both past and current. But the other thing in terms of pros is that for the longest, I was the only like woman of color at my agency, and it was just really hard sometimes inserting myself or feeling comfortable in the space. And for many reasons, but I did feel like sometimes that like limited how well or how much I showed up in the space, because I was just like overthinking or like anxious or nervous or you know, whatever. And so I do feel like being home and not having to like necessarily be like feel like the energy of the environment, or like just like look around the table, and you still see people on Zoom, but look around the table and not see anyone that looks like you, has just helped me feel more comfortable kind of just like speaking up or like throwing things out there on Slack a little bit more. So it's sad in that like we're the culture is kind of shifting, and you can't really replace, like they say, the water cooler chat conversations, can't really replace that online. But I do feel like it does kind of like level the playing field for people who may not always feel comfortable speaking up, or the first person to raise their hand, just makes it the environment a bit more comfortable to have those conversations. So that's been my experience.
Yeah, I would +1 that. I think there's pros and cons. To add on, I think like some of our team's meeting etiquette has improved. So people are, I think, more intentional with how they're taking up space in other people's calendars. I actually think as much as many people are struggling to be home with kids right now, it's also like a level of transparency and vulnerability that I think has been really huge. Like those people always had kids. Yes, they're home now, but their life was always impacted by that. And so I think it's, if anything, kind of helped us be a little bit like, no one exists in a vacuum. Life is real. We need to be a bit more, not that anyone wasn't forgiving, but there's always just room to be more gracious, which has been key. This is specific to the Bay Area, but I would spend a lot of time commuting, even within San Francisco, and especially when I had to go to Mountain View. So it's been really huge to be home. I feel like I've gained a chunk of my life back. And I know a lot of companies are thinking about that and thinking about well-being in terms of like, what's your life work balance, and commuting is part of that equation. But yeah, we've also, it's like, I miss talking to coworkers. I think there's parts of product development where it's really key to be together. So like if you're kicking off a new product design, it's nice to be in a room together and jam out. And we have yet to replicate that sensation over Zoom and whatnot. So I'm still missing that, but I know a lot of people are definitely working to make it better. So pros and cons. I'd love to go to a hybrid model. That's what I want.
I would echo everyone else's statements. There's pros and cons. I think from a sales side, there's so much that's done that's informal on the floor. Like I will hear other people speaking about a particular issue with a client, and I might have a similar client in the same predicament. And so that's one thing I very much miss. I also think that I've currently been at LinkedIn since November of last year, and for my own, for where I am within the company right now, in terms of my tenure at the organization and where I kind of see myself at the organization, I very much need to be in the office, I think, to kind of meet people randomly, like meet people in the hallway, meet people in the elevators, have that water cooler talk. And so I definitely right now, I would say from a like advocating for myself perspective, and finding myself in a little bit of a predicament because it's hard to meet people, especially because I am newer to the organization. I've only been a part of LinkedIn for about 3 months before COVID hit. So I only knew my immediate team. And during this time frame, my team grew by 2 times because we merged with a different team. So I think like right now, my department head, she's trying to make sure that we all get to know each other, especially since not everyone will have known each other. We went from 30 people to now I think it's like 80 people on the team. So I think that the organization is seeing the cons of it, and the fact that a huge pro is we're all so much more productive at home, which is amazing. Like it's really great that you actually don't need to work a 40-hour work week or however long you used to work, because now you don't have that water cooler talk that really cut into your productive time. However, for a person who's younger on their career, wants to move up in the company, meeting people definitely is something that meeting people organically is something that I think is very much missed. I'm trying right now to actually just reach out to people randomly and say, if I find out they got promoted and that they're a friend of a friend, say like, hey, you know, found out that you just got promoted, would love to, you know, grab coffee with you or something like that, just to hear more about their new role or what have you. And so I think that this is forcing me to bring my networking skills to the virtual world, which is something that I'm very uncomfortable with, to be honest, because it's very new. So it's pushing me outside my comfort zones, but we've got to all embrace it, right? So I'll just leave it at that, I guess.
Yeah, I would say, you know, it's sort of interesting listening to all of you because we have students who graduated in May and started jobs this summer. And I know one went into a job where she had had summer internship prior, so she knows people, but their entire onboarding and everything is remote. They will not see the inside of the company physically until sometime in 2021, like fall of 2021. And I'll just share that ironically for the computer science department, I think we have been more consistent about department meetings since we've gone remote, because I was so concerned about, you know, how is everybody doing? And there was such an effort this summer to get classes prepped that we met almost every week all summer, which we've never done before. So, and we still meet, you know, every week. It's wonderful. But we all desperately miss seeing the students. You know, it's just a level, you know, that is why we do what we do. And Zoom can never replace, for those of us committed to the small college teaching experience, Zoom can never replace sitting in a room and seeing a student's face of confusion or I got it, you know, it's just, so that's just a perspective from the academic side of remote life. We don't have more questions, so I just really want to thank everybody who came and all of the attendees who actually stuck it out to this point, and thank our panelists. You're all great. So you never know. We'll keep asking you to do things because you were wonderful.
Thank you so much for having
I'm gonna
us.
go back to Rashonda.
Thank you.
Just some closing notes. I just want to let students know, like, if you were inspired by what you heard today, please feel free to reach out to our Career Development Center. The panelists did a great job of articulating some of the importance of like networking and how to communicate your added value and the importance of soft skills, and even potentially how to find opportunities. So know at the Career Development Center, even recent graduates, we're here to help you. And also Danielle is going to put in the chat, with the Alumni Association, they have a variety of different programs virtual programs that are available. And we encourage you to attend those events if you can. Thank you again for coming. To the panelists, thank you so much. We really appreciate you in your time and sharing a little bit more about your experiences. So that concludes our event. And thank you. And also to the alums that highlighted that they are willing to mentor students. We're really excited that in soon, we'll be premiering a platform for students and alums to connect. So we're super excited about that. Okay, so sorry, we're closing this event now. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks, everybody.